listening to the Pulpit Fiction Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Pulpit Fiction Podcast, the lectionary podcast for preachers, seekers, and Bible geeks. This is episode 644 for Sunday, October 26, 2025. It's proper 25, ordinary time 29 here in year C. We are going to kick off the conversation on Luke 18, 9 through 14, the Pharisee and the tax collector. Then we're going to talk about the prophet Joel, chapter 2, verses 23 through 32, an ecological disaster, visions and dreams. And we'll have a brief little chat on 2 Timothy chapter 4, 6 through 8, and 16 through 18 on Paul's farewell. Beloved, I am Eric Fistler, UCC pastor out here in the shining shores of Crystal Lake, Illinois. And that's right, we've been promising it, and here it is, live once again in the Pulpit Fiction Studio. It's the marvelous Methodist, Robb McCoy in Rock Island, Illinois. Robb, what's happening?
Yeah, trying to figure out, do we remember how to do this? I don't know. We've got, what do I do? What's this thing in front of me? I don't know. We've got these notes. Yeah, here we are. It's been a little bit. When did we stop? I don't remember. We didn't go all the way to Pentecost.
That's a good, it was Easter.
It was Easter.
So a while ago. Yeah.
Well, here we are. We have risen. We're back. For better or worse, here we are. And it is good. It's good. I moved my studio back to church. For years, I was doing it at home. Pretty much since COVID, I was doing it at home. And now we've upgraded our Wi-Fi here at church and just moved the studio back here. So I'm trying to get readjusted to that. And going live, which we've never done before. That's a little bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are going to be watching. But we can't just edit stuff out as easily as we used to be able to, but we got to be careful with that. But yeah, here we are. It's pretty good. It feels good to be back.
Yeah, it does. It does. And so it is fun to be back. And we are trying this live for the first time because some people like to watch their podcast, which is a whole different thing. But nothing wrong with that. And so just bear with us. We might have some technological kinks and things like that we got to work out. But we're happy to be here with you. We also are excited, tomorrow, Robb, we're getting back in the interview business where we are interviewing one of our former professors, the Reverend Dr. Michael Kinnaman, on his book, A Rooftop in Jerusalem, which is super fun. So really looking forward to being in the studio with Michael Kinnaman. I'm curious not only to talk about his book, but to have some more conversation with him just on his thoughts about what's going on in the world. For those of you who don't know, he has been a seminary professor, now retired for a long time, the former general secretary of the National Council of Churches, and he was at Eden for a while and was active in the Disciples of Christ, and perhaps still is. So yeah, so looking forward to that. Robb, when we last talked, you had two high schoolers, or you had a daughter in high school. Now you have one less daughter in high school.
Yeah, still two daughters, but only one in high school.
Yeah.
The other one is in the war-torn, war-ravaged city of Chicago at DePaul. She's been shot like 7 times. No, I shouldn't joke about that. It's a wonderful city. She loves it. She's loving her college experience at DePaul. We're missing her, that's for sure. But yeah, we're doing good. And you're talking about Dr. Kinnaman. It's funny. I feel like he's been a part of the show, right? Like if we're going to name someone that we've quoted the most over the years, he'd be up there. I mean, there might be, Clint McCann maybe, and, I don't know, Walter Brueggemann. There's a handful of people, but he's one of those guys that I go back to and think about all the time. I mean, he's been the sort of communion of saints on the show for, he's been the part of the cloud of witnesses of this show for 13 years because he was pretty influential, I know, for me, and I think you feel the same way. So I'm just excited about chatting with him and just being able to say thank you. It's great. Like I've had a lot of great teachers in my life. It's going to feel good just to be able to say thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As much as anything. And then talk about his amazing book and all that stuff too. But
no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that he is without a doubt the person, the most quoted non-biblical scholar, on the show.
Fair enough.
So it'll be good. We're really looking forward to that. And then kind of keep recording. And we're looking forward, if you are in South Carolina and you are a member of the ELCA, we are looking forward to being with you all at your gathering coming up in a couple weeks to do some talking and some preaching and all that sort of stuff. So we're really looking forward to that. So that's going to be really fun. So again, for South Carolina Synod of the ELCA, we're excited for your clergy leadership gathering. But right now, Rob, let's jump in, and we're going to jump into Luke. While we're getting these kinks knocked out, by the way, friends, we may bring back the voices in the wilderness, but we're just taking a little bit to just kind of ease back into it. But right now, let's jump into the gospel.
Very few comparatively know what is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Good news, everyone.
Well, here we are. This is the good news coming to us from Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. This is the parable, or this is the Pharisee and the tax collector. Jesus told this parable to certain people who had convinced themselves that they were righteous and who looked on everyone else with disgust. Two people went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed about himself with these words: God, I thank you that I'm not like everyone else, crooks, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of everything I receive. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He wouldn't even lift his eyes to look toward heaven. Rather, he struck his chest and said, God, show mercy to me, a sinner. I tell you, this person went down to his home justified rather than the Pharisee. All who lift themselves up will be brought low, and those who make themselves low will be lifted up.
All right. So an interesting story, Rob, and I think you kind of alluded to this just in your intro to it, in that this is a parable. It's not something that actually happened. Sometimes when I hear this, I feel like, and it may be this way in some of the other gospels where he points this out as opposed to just kind of telling this story between the two. And I got to be honest, Rob, I think this is right? We've got a great parable here against self-righteousness. And for me, at least, this is a great parable because in a time when we are as divided as we are, distinguishing the difference between speaking up for justice, righteousness, and our faith and speaking out of a sense of self-righteousness of, well, I'm happy that we have it all figured out, but woe betide those who are falling apart and believe differently and those different things. It can be a razor's edge at moments to kind of, check ourselves about where we're at. So I kind of dig this passage a little bit and this invitation to humble boldness.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it's really easy to fall into the trap, right? I mean, and this is what parables do, is challenge us. Like it's really easy to picture ourselves as one of the characters, but part of the challenge of the parable is to realize, no, you're the other one, right?
Yeah.
And this is a parable about flipping everything upside down. And as soon as I think I'm the one that's right, I've got to be real, real careful. Now, that's not to say that I'm not right sometimes, right? Sometimes we do have to take a stand for righteousness, for justice. Sometimes we do have to protest or advocate or do these things, but we need to do so always with humility and realize how quickly it can become us versus them, which is really dangerous. As, gosh, I don't remember who said it. I'm not going to say it right, but whenever you draw a line between us and them, we find that Jesus is on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like something like that, right? The idea of as soon as you start dividing people, as us and them, or you're right and I'm right and you're wrong, you got to be real careful. Even though, as I say that, there are times when we do need to stand up for what is right. But the key, like you said, is verse 9 is everything, right? Why Jesus is telling this story, he's telling it to people who convinced themselves that they were righteous and who looked on everyone else with disgust. And that's the trick, because I can hold fast in my conviction and know I'm right in a sense without looking on everyone else with disgust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the trick here, because here's the thing. Let's be honest. This Pharisee is exactly how many of these Pharisees would you like in your congregation? Now, some of you are going to be like, I don't want this Pharisee in my congregation. I hear you, but I would ask, how many tithers do you have in your congregation? It's stewardship season, right? I mean, this is a big deal. And in all pieces, right, there is a piece where it seems like, he's fasting, he's doing all of these things, but it's the differentiation, as you said, Rob, right? It's I love this. I love the honesty of the parable, right? Thank God I'm not like everyone else. That's the problem, right? That's
Mhm.
the issue. And it reminds me of, I've been doing a Bible study on the Psalms. So we've been talking about the difference between mishpaat and tzedakah, between justice and righteousness. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs talks about this, and he has a great way where basically he says, like, justice is this idea that that there is equity and equality, and how we have one rule, one law. There's not one for us and one for them, right? Us and them, we are covered under the same law. And that is the mishpaat, the same idea that we are covered, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're a widow, an orphan, a Pharisee, a tax collector, you're covered under the same. But tzedakah, the righteousness he talks about is, we can imagine and I'm paraphrasing it, but we can imagine a society in which everyone's following the rule of law, and yet there are vast inequities, right? Where some are living in multiple homes while others have nowhere to live, right? Some are throwing away mountains of food while others are barely able to sustain themselves, right? And I feel like that's what we have here. We have a Pharisee that we might say is just, but not righteous. The Pharisee is doing all the things that the Pharisee should be doing, but he's missing the righteousness. He's following in the law without embodying the law. And when I say law, I just mean, in that psalmic sense of the instruction of Jesus, not necessarily just Torah, but or the instruction of God. And so I feel like that's that piece where we are called not just to this original piece of following and doing the things, which are not bad, but and I think that's when we dip into self-righteousness, when we forget to embody the law. And this goes back to Israel's problem that leads them into the exile in the first place, according to Isaiah, right? They got all the festivals done. They got all the laws right. They just forgot about the widow, the orphan, and the stranger.
Mm. Yeah. It's one thing to take care of your holiness. It's another thing to take care of somebody else's well-being, right? And to care for the systems that are forcing someone, not that anyone's being forced into being a tax collector, right? But to a certain extent they are, right? Like, they are being forced to be a tax collector. There are systems at play here that is forcing persecution and oppression, and to be blind to that while I'm just taking care of my own thing, that's a real problem. I love what you say though. Like, I would love this guy in my church, right? He goes to every Bible study. He shows up at he's got good attendance. He's a good donor. But how often though is that sort of, is his heart being changed, right? Mm-hmm. That's the key. And this is what Jesus, metanoia, that the repentance is a change of heart and mind.
Yeah.
And, that's a tougher nut to crack sometimes, is how you treat others. He's thinking he's checking all the boxes, but at the same time, the looking at disdain with others, looking at disgust with others, instead of seeing the tax collector for who he is. Right. Next week, next week is Zacchaeus, right? One of our favorite stories, Zacchaeus the tax collector, which is a story about people looking at Zacchaeus with disgust, right? It's not, and we'll get to this, but I don't think it's a story of Zacchaeus being converted. It's a story of the community mistreating him, and Jesus, kind of calling them out for it. This reminds me of, what brings me to mind is Jordan Klepper. Do you know Jordan Klepper?
No,
he's
Jordan Klepper.
He is the man on the street. I think he works for the Daily Show.
Okay.
And he does these interviews. He'll go into, Trump rallies or MAGA rallies, and he interviews them. It's sort of like the old jaywalking with Jay Leno.
Oh, yeah.
He would ask people just like basic trivia questions, but he's much more pointed and sort of political. And he'll ask them, things like, should we bomb Agrabah, right? Like, which is the fictional nation of
Aladdin.
Of Aladdin, right? Those kinds of things, right? And they're funny. I mean, and they're frustrating. And he talks to people, and they don't make a lot of sense. And he traps them in their own logic, and it's really entertaining. But is it loving?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that watches those things, and I feel good. It makes me feel good for thinking, well, at least I'm not like one of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, is this really lifting up the community? Is this actually building bridges? Can you instead, and I'm not, it's a daily show, it's an entertainment show, it's a comedy show. That's what it's supposed to entertain. But part of me is like, is this actually, is there a way to engage people in honest discussion in building relationship and trying to see the reasons why people believe the way they believe? Is there a moment, can you have compassion for someone with whom you disagree? For people that are, yes, I think they fall for misinformation. And yeah, I argue a lot of the policies might be hateful and harmful. But is there a way to engage that is still building up and healing and not just mocking? And that's what I see in this is a parable about someone that's mocking someone with whom they disagree instead of actually trying to build up community. Remember that Jesus' disciples included a tax collector and a zealot.
Yeah.
Right. Like they don't get more opposite. Right. And that's why I think this parable is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that there's this piece of well, first of all, I'll say this, Rob, I love that connection that you made. I had a similar awkward thing where I was watching a reel of a roast of Ann Coulter, and I had to stop watching it because I was, I vehemently disagree with that woman on just about everything she said. However, I couldn't do it. Anyway, we've got some stuff in the show notes about Karl Barth, which is, Barth had some things to say about this. And he talks about sin as the depravity of humankind. And one of the things that Barth alludes to is that the tax collector is justified because he recognizes his total depravity, right? His sin, which, by the way, Rob, what is the sin of the tax collector? Presumably just being a tax collector, right? Maybe cheating, oppressing his people, but we don't actually know, right? Which is also, by the way, helpful if we're heading into Zacchaeus next week. Be good to be aware before we just start throwing people under the bus. But either way, the tax collector recognizes total depravity. Now, Barth says that the Pharisee is not justified because he relies on his own actions. That may be possible, but I think instead it's the issue that's here is the Pharisee still recognizes God. The Pharisee hasn't propped himself up as a false idol or anything like that. His recognition of God is exemplified in this prayer of thanksgiving, where he seems to celebrate and give thanks to God. As proud as he is, he give thanks to God for it. And I think that is still important that we see that. But the justification piece is not on the acknowledgement of God, but I think what we've been talking about too is in love, right? It's not in perfection and it's not in pride, but as we said, it's about love of self, which he's got, but also love of neighbor, right? You have to love your neighbor as yourself. So while both of them may be expressing their love of God, they're missing the connection of the other two. Well, I should say the Pharisee is missing the connection of the other two. There's no inclination the tax collector even recognizes or realizes the Pharisee is even there. He's kind of caught up in its own thing. And so we have this idea of trusting in God, but where that trust in God, right? If we're in this portion of the Pharisee, oh, I'm so happy, things are going so well, look how great I'm doing, then the question is not, look how much better I'm doing than them, but rather, what can I do to help out? What are the pieces I can do to lift up and help somebody who's struggling? So, and I think that's the different mindset. And I think it's tempting, like you said, Rob, it's a beautiful piece, because I am constantly tempted to want to show how much smarter, how much more faithful, how much more just I am than somebody else. And it's an important thing to say, listen, victory over whomever we disagree with isn't really a win here. It's victory together, and it's about transformation of our congregations and transformation of our neighbors who believe and think differently. It can't simply be domination over. Now, does this mean that we still speak out, obviously, on behalf of justice and righteousness? Yes, of course it does. And at the same time, not lose sight of the humanity of the others, of whom we consider to be them, whom we consider to be other, whose actions we may vehemently disagree with.
And the Pharisee wasn't cast out into Gehenna.
Yeah, right.
Right. I mean, he goes, the tax collector goes home justified, but it's not like the Pharisee is struck down. There's still an open chance it's just that prayer wasn't that bringing him justification, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that his life wasn't justified. It doesn't mean he's condemned to eternity, to the pits. It just means that in this moment, in this story, one prayer was of repentance and transformation, and the other wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, right? Sometimes we treat these stories as, or this parable as, well, this is clear evidence that he is struck down forever. Well, no, that's not really the story either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and remember, like, what is the vision here? What's the ending vision, right? And also to understand the context, right? Jesus is saying this to certain people who convinced themselves they were righteousness and looked on everyone else with disgust. So let's recognize that that's the context by which Jesus is telling this parable. So, it's kind of on the nose there, but this end piece, right? All those who lift themselves up, right, will be brought low, and all those who are low will be brought up. What we see here, Rob, is a grand leveling. Right? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, yes, it's a reversal in the way that we understand things, but it's not a reversal in that the Pharisee is brought to the bottom and the tax collector is brought to the top, but rather they're brought in equity with one another. The moment that one is lifted up, lifts themselves up above the other.
This is a story that's told by Mary's boy.
Yeah, it is.
Right? The Magnificat. This is the Magnificat. This is the product of the Magnificat, right?
Yep.
And that's the great leveling.
Absolutely. All right, friends, head over to pulpitfiction.com where you can find more and comments and things in the show notes, as well as some links to some resources. But right now, let's head to this.
Previously on the Bible.
I smell Heaven's Bakery cooking up something good for you, sister.
All right, Heaven's Bakery brings us to Joel chapter 2, verses 23 through 32. Beloved, you're going to recognize this passage, but you're not going to recognize probably hearing this in October. But let's jump into it. Children of Zion, rejoice and be glad in the Lord your God, because he will give you the early rain as a sign of righteousness. He will pour down abundant rain for you, the early and the late rain as before. The threshing floors will be full of grain. The vats will overflow with new wine and fresh oil. I will repay you for the years that the cutting locust and the swarming locust and the hopping locust and the devouring locust have eaten, my great army which I sent against you. And you will eat abundantly and be satisfied. And you will praise the name of the Lord your God who has done wonders for you. And my people will never again be put to shame. You will know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, no other exists. Never again will my people be put to shame. After that, I will pour out my spirit upon everyone. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. In those days, I will also pour out my spirit on the male and female slaves. I will give signs in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon blood before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. But everyone who calls on the Lord's name will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be security, as the Lord has promised, and in Jerusalem the Lord will summon those who survive.
What a fascinating text and its use in our calendar. I was just looking at it, and according to Text Week, this Joel 2 is, but just verse 1 through 18 is a reading for every Ash Wednesday, right? ABC, Ash Wednesday. This is part of that. This is in that same context, although not this exact reading. For Thanksgiving in the Revised Common Lectionary, which we don't generally have a Thanksgiving service, but that's not a terribly uncommon service. So it's Thanksgiving year B. In the Episcopal Church, it's in the Easter season also. And in the Episcopal and Lutheran traditions, it's often a Pentecost text. Right? So we've got Ash Wednesday, Thanksgiving, Pentecost, and now here in the middle of ordinary time, in the middle of Kingdom Tide. What a fascinating thing. And I'm not even sure what to make of that, other than it is clearly the Pentecost text comes from, because Peter quotes this, right? I mean, this is Peter in his speech to the people when they think that they're just a bunch, that when they're all drunk, he says, no, this is what the prophet Joel said. And it's one of my favorite lines I've shared so many times. Your old will dream dreams, your young will see visions. The reversal of that is beautiful to me, because I can't help but think of one, it's this idea of the Holy Spirit being poured out on everybody, young and old, but the idea that the old dream dreams and the young see visions. I think often we think of those things as flipped. That it's young people who have dreams and it's old people who have visions, right? The old wise.
Yep.
So that's just one of my favorite little couplets in all of the Bible. But just a fascinating thing that it's used in so many different ways and somewhat pulled out of context, which is a tricky thing to name because we don't really know exactly what Joel's context is. There's a little bit of debate over that. It's a hard to place historically. But just fascinating thing how versatile this passage has been from this book of Joel, which I think the average believer probably didn't even realize there is a book of Joel. Like they're thinking, oh, is it the Piano Man? Like, what are you talking about? It's just an interesting how versatile this text is.
Yeah, I'm probably reading too much into it. It is a versatile text, and it's interesting the times it comes, right? I think Thanksgiving, Pentecost is a festival that celebrates the giving of the Torah. So, it's interesting to see like another kind of festival piece, Thanksgiving there. And then I think it works even for Ash Wednesday because it's this acknowledgement of what has happened and a celebration of God's grace, right? I mean, it's this, the need, it is a combination, at least how we acknowledge Ash Wednesday is this tension between such a celebratory acknowledgement of God's grace, but also not just the gift of grace, but our need for that grace. And so we have this, I mean, gosh, what a catastrophic vision in two different chunks, right? So the first one is you've got this plague of locusts, which is an invading army. Almost every biblical scholar talks about it. And you see this in a multiple different areas that talks about it as, back at the beginning of Joel, for example, we don't know exactly what this is referencing, but we know that there is a invading nation, right? So go back to Joel chapter 1, verse 4, we have a terrible locust plague, but chapter 1, verse 6 talks about a nation. So multiple biblical scholars say that the locusts are a metaphor for this nation that is invading that basically this invasion is a natural disaster. But we go on to also see, Rob, this nearly apocalyptic view of, I will give signs in the heavens and earth, blood and fire and columns and of smoke. The sun will turn to darkness and the moon to blood. And this is the word that stood out to me that it hasn't before. All these things will happen before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. So the thing that stood out to me is I usually, Rob, over the last 6 months that we've been apart, somebody sent us a note and they said, I wonder how Rob and Eric are thinking about what's going on. Rob, I spend at least some moments, sometimes longer, sometimes less, but every day, absolutely sick to my stomach with what's going on in the United States. I mean, just like literally sick to my stomach. And, I'm on the train. I'm an hour and a half outside of Chicago, but where I'm on the train line in Chicago. And, a couple weeks ago, so we're seeing, masked armed federal agents on the street of Chicago harassing, shooting pepper spray balls into people, including a local minister in Chicago. I mean, these are things that I witnessed when I was living in the West Bank. It is mind-boggling to see it here. Just a couple weeks ago, ICE agents pulled over a car a mile away from the church, pulled somebody out of it, threw them in their car, and just, masked agents just went. It looked like it was like I had a friend who saw this happen. She was 2 cars behind. She said it looked like something out of a movie that you wouldn't expect, where masked people just came in, took somebody, took him away. And then when she reported it to the police rolled their eyes and laughed at her why she should be concerned. Not to mention that the healthcare issue in the United States that is reaching, that is bad to begin with and about to get a whole lot worse, that we are in the midst of the second week of a government shutdown, which always hurts the least of these the most. We are seeing an actual, like, the unbelievable gutting of education as well as civil rights. As we are recording this, the Supreme Court is debating whether or not to roll back one of the major provisions of the civil rights movement and equitable voting laws. All of these things, and that's just the top of things, right? I mean, I'm not like we could spend another hour getting into all the things. It is a nausea roulette every day of like what horror is it. And that's why I need this passage. I need this passage to say, because it's not just for those who are on the other side, it's for those who are in the midst of the edge of despair, of thinking, oh, like it can't get any worse, right? I mean, it can't get worse when the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood, with blood and fire and columns of smoke and hordes of locusts. All these things are representations of things that are so far vastly beyond our control. And yet they are not beyond God's control. And the goodness of God doesn't mean that these horrible things do not happen. It does mean that these horrific things will not have the last word. And so this is a passage and a message of immense hope, which is why I think Peter uses it for his Pentecost sermon, because he's building off of the immense hope of the resurrection that he wants to share. But it's this immense hope and an opportunity to engage in this new day that God is bringing around, this new thing, these visions and these dreams and these opportunities, right? Visions and dreams are something that's coming. So for me, Rob, I realize I said that for a long time, but I need this passage. I need Joel. This passage speaks to me almost more than the gospel reading.
Yeah, because it's, like you said, it's so needed, because what does it look like to have the Holy Spirit, the Spirit to be poured out on everyone as the locusts are invading, right? Like you said, it's interesting because Robert Alter, who is a Hebrew scholar that we have a lot of respect for, says it's the other way around. It was that the armies are a metaphor for the actual locusts, that this was an actual natural disaster that Joel is talking about.
Oh, funny.
But even so, again, who gets harmed when locusts invade a nation?
Yeah.
But the poor, right? The working class, the workers, that they're the ones that get affected the most. Who gets affected most when there is an invading army, right? And when I think about our cities getting invaded by locusts, that feels like a metaphor that's apt. By masked locusts that are doing great harm, that are doing these things, and so what do we do? But what can we do? For one, we can hold on to this promise, right? That God will repay you for the years of the cutting locust, that you will eat abundantly and be satisfied, that you will know that I am the Lord in the midst of all of this. And what does it look like when the Holy Spirit is poured out upon everyone? It looks like people rallying. It looks like people speaking up. It looks like marches for justice, and it looks like being shot in the head with a pepper pellet. And that's a scary thing, right? And I remember, you mentioned that, and that was a pastor, and I forget his name now, there in the Chicago area, who got shot with a pepper spray, basically. And he's fine, but it hurt like heck, I'm sure. Yeah. It wasn't a mortal wound, but it was just an act of cruelty for no reason. All he was doing, he had been praying for the men that were standing there, totally peacefully. There was absolutely no threat, and yet that's their option, was to shoot this pepper spray at him. And I remember thinking, is that where we're headed? Right? That wasn't that far away. I want to go to Chicago to visit my daughter and meet her new friends. I don't want to go there to have to march on ice, right? Or do these kinds of things. But at the same time, that's what it might look like. Uh-huh. When the Spirit is poured out on people, sometimes it moves us to things and places that we don't necessarily want to do, or places we don't want to go. And It's a scary thing. But this is also the promise that, yeah, that's what the Spirit looks like sometimes. And it's worth it because you are doing this as a sign of righteousness. Those things are a sign of righteousness, even in the midst of the locust cutting everything down.
Yeah. Yeah, and this and it's the Ruach of God that's going to do this, right? This breath of God. And I love that, we have this. This is the same. So Jonah was here. We had Jonah in the lecture several weeks ago, right? And in Jonah, it's the Ruach of God, the same thing that brings this new excitement, is also the same thing that causes the storm that threatens to sink the ship that Jonah's on, right? So we have this. It's a very powerful thing. And Judges, it gives someone the power to tear a lion apart or to break bindings and to overcome enemies. It's inspiring. Ezekiel, you think about giving life to dry bones, and liberative, right? It's the Ruach that divides the waters of the Red Sea or the Reed Sea, and allows people to come in. So this idea that, and I love what you said, Rob, that it's this Ruach, the Spirit of God, that's going to do it, and no one can escape it. Right? It doesn't matter if you're young. It's not even that it's for everybody. No one can escape it. Young, old, slave, free. It gets back to this idea of leveling. This blessing of God, which will be a blessing to some, and let's be honest, a curse to others. Right? And is going to move us into this thing. Those who are high will be brought low. And that may include me. And so I think that's the difficult piece there. How can we move through this disaster, and how can we move into a hope? Because despair, I was preaching about this last weekend. Despair just makes us withdraw. Withdraw is not going to do anything. We need hope, because hope moves us to engage. All right, friends, there's more in the show notes. You can find that, again, at pulpitfiction.com. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here on Joel in the show notes. But now we're actually going to dip in very briefly into our third reading, a little wafer for you.
Now that's a tasty wafer.
Yeah, the wafer. Where did that? I'm just trying to. That's a tasty burger. That's where that came from. Why did we call it a wafer?
Because we used to highlight a resource when we started the show a long time ago. We used to have a resource every single week, and so we had a tasty wafer segment. So those of you who've been listening a long time, you may remember the old tasty wafer segment.
Yeah, and that was a pun off of Samuel Jackson eating the guy's burger and
Big Kahuna burger.
That's a tasty burger.
That's a tasty burger. Well, it was better than the other phrase that said, we're the ones that say bad mother pastor. I don't know. I thought it was a little too edgy. It was a little wild.
I've got a sticker that says that. We do have stickers that say that if you want one. Anyway. All right, here it is. 2 Timothy 4 verses 6 through 8, and then skip ahead to 16 through 18. I haven't looked at it yet. I can't imagine why would you want to skip anything in 1st or 2nd Timothy?
I know, right?
Anyway, all right, here we go. I'm already being poured out like a sacrifice to God, and the time of my death is near. I have fought the good fight, finished the race, and kept the faith. At last, the champion's wreath that is awarded for righteousness is waiting for me. The Lord, who is the righteous judge, is going to give it to me on that day. He's giving it not only to me, but also to all those who have set their heart on waiting for his appearance. No one took my side at my first court hearing. Everyone deserted me. I hope that God doesn't hold it against them. But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength, so that the entire message would be preached through me, and so all the nations could hear it. I was also rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil action, and will save me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and always. Amen.
All right, so a couple things. Yeah, you can skip verses 9 through 15. It's a little bit weird. It's very clearly a letter where, so Paul basically says, hey, you should come to me real quick. And then he's angry at the Moss who has abandoned him. Like, he's like, all these other people abandoned me. Only Luke is still with me. So he's like, get Mark and come and see me. And by the way, don't forget to bring my coat. I mean, literally, when you come, bring that coat I left with Carpus and Troas. Oh, and some scrolls. And I mean, it's like he's sending his shopping list with it. So long story short, there's like this weird little, very personal chunk of like, these are the people that made me angry and I'm really disappointed in. Like, bring these things. So it's okay to skip that. This is it. We're not gonna, next week we're gonna jump into you're either gonna, if you're doing the epistle, 2 Thessalonians. Some of you next week are gonna be jumping into All Saints Sunday. It depends on kind of where you're at. So this is it for our wonderful time that we've been having these weeks here in 2 Timothy. And I appreciate, there's this desperation. It's kind of this last act, Rob. He's done these things. He feels that the end is coming, right? Everybody stood against me, and I love this. It's everyone deserted me. I hope that God doesn't hold it against them. Okay, slow your roll, dude. Like, we got it right.
I couldn't help it. I had to hold it in. I almost chuckled reading that I hope passive aggressive Paul. I mean, and this is, obviously this is a disputed letter. Most people don't think this was Paul.
Yeah.
But this is a moment that it really does sound like Paul. The sort of humble brag, the sort of passive aggressive, I hope God doesn't hold it against them. Like, and obviously that's tone that doesn't have to be read into it. But man, there's parts of this that really do feel authentic in that sort of, look at all the things that I did. Not that I'm bragging, but look at all these things that I did. That is very Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I like this. It pairs, I think, really well with the Joel more than with the gospel reading. We have this idea of, because it's this hope, right? I mean, you can hear his desperation. You can hear his worry and his hopelessness, and also at the, or his threatening despair, I should say, but he doesn't lose hope. Instead, what we get is this other piece, where he believes that God is going to rescue him, even though, and there's this kind of juxtaposition, right? Look at all these people who have abandoned me and haven't helped me, but God's going to be with me, right? And there is that. I mean, it's I think that it's a little concerning because you could take this and say, well, you're being a little Pharisaic here, he was the Pharisee, the Pharisees, right? I mean, and so it feels like the connection to the gospel reading is, it's kind of like the question, Rob, this isn't always the case, but when you meet somebody and they say, well, this happens in church. First I was with this person and then they were a big jerk. And then I was with that person and then they were a big jerk. And so then I went over here and then they were a big jerk. And now I'm with this other person and they're a big jerk. And there's a part where it's like, is it all of them? Or maybe it's you, right? And so there's almost a piece where I feel like Paul is like, oh, that parable was about me, right? Like, thank God I wasn't all these other people who abandoned me. I mean, clearly I'm righteous and God will save me. But I do appreciate it that he does say, I hope God doesn't hold it against him. There's not, it's very Paul in that regard.
Yeah. And it is, it's a sort of last words. It's a reflection on, there's a part of this that is incredibly poignant, right? I fought the good fight. I finished the race and kept the faith, right? And I've thought many times, like if people could say that about me at my funeral, right? That would be, what else could you ask for, right? And there's a resigned poignancy that is in that moment, and I think about he's looking back and seeing what he's accomplished, right? I mean, and there are so many people. The Gentiles know of Christ because of it, and to be fair, it's true, right? Like we make fun of Paul sometimes, but the nations heard the message of Christ because of Paul. Now you could argue, was he totally faithful all the time? And especially when you look at 1 and 2 Timothy and the struggles there, but Paul wasn't perfect. Christ was.
Yeah.
Paul was a messenger, and understanding that there's all we can do in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of the locust, in the midst of praying for justification, all we can do is hope that we are doing our best. And I think in the beauty of this passage is that's basically what Paul's coming to is, I did what I could, and that's all any of us can do. Yeah. And God's been with me the whole time. And, that I think there is some beauty in that. And just acknowledging the resignation of what it is to serve. It's not necessarily about the laurels and the awards you get, but it's there's something more, there's something deeper.
Yeah, Michael Jackson, not that Michael Jackson, different Michael Jackson, has a blog. You can find it in the show notes. We got a link to it. But Michael Jackson says a lot, just like exactly what you're saying, Rob. He has this quote. He says, quote, "All three verbs are in the perfect, parentheses, prophetic perfect, perhaps, and parentheses. Even though Paul is still alive and writing these words, he views his life lived for Christ as complete. As my Greek teacher, Roger Hahn, always loved to point out, for the perfect tense, completed action that has continuing and ongoing repercussions. I like that idea. Our finished lives continue to speak, continue to influence, to make a difference in the lives of those who we served. That's how we leave a legacy." And I love this, that the fact that those are in that that perfect tense, right? This idea that it's done and ongoing, right? That almost paradoxical done and ongoing says a lot for what you say, right? He came, he did what he did. He didn't always do it perfectly, but he did what he could. And I feel like there's a piece, I just got back last week from Appalachia Service Project. And there's it's a weird thing for those of you who've done it. You haven't done that, Rob, have you? You haven't
Which
done
one?
Appalachia Service Project?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
I didn't think so, but I know it's a Methodist thing, so I thought maybe. But so you go into a position, you go into a house to make it safer, warmer, or drier, and you enter a project and you pick up where somebody else left off. And that person may have been a professional contractor, and they may have done everything perfectly. Or that might have been a youth group that maybe didn't even know how to hammer a nail. But they did the best they could. And then you come in for a week, and you do what you can to advance that project and do the best you can. And then you leave. And this was our 20th year. None of the people on our group, even those who have been doing this for 20 years, have never been there at the end of a project. Because then you leave and somebody else picks up. And it's this interesting idea of our piece is complete, but this is still ongoing. And there's something beautiful and church-like. It reminds me of like Pillars of the Earth, the book Pillars of the Earth.
Building
right?
the cathedral.
Yep, it's this cathedral building thing. And I love this idea that Paul's idea is, it's complete. He fought the good fight. He finished the race. He kept the faith. And now he has to believe, even though all these other people have disappointed him, he believes that this will keep going. And I think that there's something powerful in that.
Yeah. We stand on the backs of giants, right? I mean, and that's, what's the other quote? We can't, we know that the suffering of the world is too big for us to fix, but that doesn't mean we can just give up. I mean, That's a terrible paraphrase of it. Because there's something bigger that's happening here that we're a part of. And Paul acknowledging that is, we're continuing on. We're the ones continuing on that work, even in the midst of the locusts and the red moon and all the storms that are gathering. We're just, all we can do is keep going.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of the Pulpit Fiction Podcast, our live podcast here. You can join us live on Wednesdays at 1:30-ish Central Time. We would love to hear from you. Our home and webpage is pulpitfiction.com. We're on X and Instagram and Facebook at Pulpit Fiction. You can find us on X at Pulpit F Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and now you can find us on YouTube as well, all the other places that you find us. You can always email us, show@pulpitfiction.us. And friends, we can only keep going with your amazing support. So support the show and support our website and all those resources by going to pulpitfiction.com/support.
Well, we want to thank Scott Fletcher for those voice bumpers. Dick, no, we're not using Dick Dale and the Deltones.
Oh, no.
Nikolai Heideless for the transition music, and our friend Brian O'Dean for creating this closing song for us. Please have a blessed week.
We hate to say it's time to go, but it happens every time, so now you're free to go about your day. We've heard the word and voice voice and song. We've wondered and we've laughed along, so go and preach the good news on your way. This is the Pulpit Fiction Podcast for preachers and seekers and Bible geeks. This is the Pulpit Fiction Podcast. We'll see you back next week.